Your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
I'll call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, don't go.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000. Or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100 *21# and select daily, or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
A new dawn on Behind the Headlines with me, Timothy Nyangweso. Every Wednesday, live in our studios in the heart of Kampala. We have conversations that have analysis, explanation, but not every truth is fact, and not every fact is truth. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m. on your public broadcaster.
All on your public broadcaster. UBC, inspiring Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Good morning, and thank you so much for being part of UBC TV this lovely morning. Why am I saying lovely? I don't know where you are, but at least the temperatures are not very high. When Winston Churchill came to Uganda, he called this the Pearl of Africa because he noticed the good weather, the green. Of course, day by day, green is deteriorating. Now you may not have that much as it was. But the two weather or the two rainy seasons we have are not for many countries. So I say good morning, it's a good morning, it's not hot. I don't know where you are, but at least where I am, the weather is very lovely. And I'm very excited because today we are going to be discussing something very important. Whenever I'm discussing matters to do with disability inclusion, I'm very passionate. Why? Because you may not be born with a disability, but disability is something that can knock you away anytime. I remember I started 2024 when I'm a very energetic person with all my legs very proper. Today, one has a problem after an accident. So I learned that we must put all efforts to discuss disability and front it, because you never know when that can knock your door. And if you didn't set a fertile ground, a conducive environment for you, then boop, there you fall. So join me, welcome my guests today with whom we are going to be discussing issues regarding inclusion of persons with disability as we are commemorating the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and we are focusing on breaking the barriers. Join me, welcome Abbas Ruyombia, who is doing a Master's of Law, that is at Makerere University. You're most welcome, Abbas.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, and then just next to me, I have the Dean of Students, Makerere University, Dr. Winfred Kabumbumalia. I hope I have it right. Kabumbuli. I hope I have it right. You're most welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Robert.
And it's a pleasure having both of you this lovely morning. Now, one of the things that the disability movement has fronted so much is inclusion. And I want to begin with Doctor here. When we talk about inclusion, what are we referring to, and why is it that now things keep on changing, but there's so much voices talking about inclusion?
Thank you very much, Robert. Inclusion refers to creating, is a practice of creating an environment that provides equal access to opportunities and resources to people that might have been marginalized or excluded, including persons with disabilities, such as mental disability or physical disability. It is the creation of an environment where everyone grows and thrives regardless of ability. And that is what we are at Makerere University. We aim to provide an environment that is inclusive, both academically and socially, where our students and staff can grow and achieve their full potential and achieve their dreams as well.
Now, having given us inclusion, that takes me to Yombia. Now we go to, what are these barriers to inclusion? Because it means there is a space we are fighting for, but what is hindering us to get into that space?
Thank you so much, Robert. Inclusion in itself, as it is premised on the idea that nothing for us without us, it is taking in a direction that you must do something where I am part of. But there are barriers that have prevented so far this to materialize. Some of them are structural in nature. For example, infrastructure that we have in various spaces, they are not accessible at all. That is to say, if I visited a particular space, if I am using a wheelchair, I may have to stay at the first level because there has not been any adjustment to enable me to go at the top floor. Someone could say, what if someone is carried? Carrying someone, that in itself is demeaning to a person and like lowering the person's dignity. So that means the failure to adjust infrastructure to become accessible to all people in itself restricts inclusion. Then inclusion has also been, one of the other barrier is resources. As a matter of fact, inclusion requires resources. For example, adjusting infrastructure, adjusting practices in employment, creating a favorable environment. You must spend some resources. Now, to some people, they feel this could take a lot of resources. While we still argue that this is not very expensive, it has been looked at as a costly venture, and that's why not much has been taken to ensure inclusion, because many people feel it takes a lot of resources. But also the other problem is our opinions and views that we hold towards persons with disabilities. Now, as Robert, you did point out earlier, all people are candidates of disability, all of us. Now, because we are candidates of disabilities, we have failed to acknowledge that, and consequently, our failure to acknowledge that has made us fail to plan and change our perspectives to appreciate the fact that persons with disabilities study, they are well educated. 2, they can perform to the maximum abilities in any work environment. So we simply look at them from a negative point of view or a point of pity and sympathy. Now, our failure to empathize or our empathy, but characterized by sympathy, has failed inclusion, because we always fear, if I bring this person, how will I enable him come at the top floor? If I bring this person, how will I be able to create means to ensure he can do this work? If I bring this person, he may become a problem at the workplace. Now, if this person is in my class at school, how will I teach them? We do not explore how we can actually adjust slightly. So mindset is the biggest problem in inclusion. And many of them have become inclusion blind, because we are not willing to adjust our mindset, our thinking. And because of mindset, that makes us feel resources are a problem. That makes us feel like we can't adjust our infrastructure. That makes us actually only think of inclusion as an entrepreneurial venture and not a venture of creating a world where everyone can thrive regardless of their abilities, as long as we create an environment.
When you talk about think of it as an entrepreneurial venture, what are you referring to here?
Now, initially, we know that the government had come up with a policy of creating tax waivers for people who are employing persons with disabilities. Why that policy got to be reviewed was because companies would have on their payroll 20 persons with disability, but these people were not working. They are simply on the payroll, such that you get tax waivers. Now, to that extent, you are only seeing how can you make this venture an entrepreneurial approach that then you can get waiver, you get more profits as a company. But this person is not only seeking to get a living, he must get a decent, dignified, and fulfilling living where they are doing work and they are paid for that work, not just to be on the payroll. Now, at that point, companies were only being entrepreneurial too. When you choose to be inclusive because you seek for a particular advantage, then still you are not being inclusive. You are only creating an environment that enables you acquire a particular advantage, but you are not in a long run planning to ensure that you create an environment that with or without an advantage, you are in a position to create an environment where all persons of different abilities can come, thrive, and benefit your establishment or your company. So to that point, you are being an entrepreneur, and that in itself is hindering inclusion and disadvantaging the policies which are being created to ensure the world is made more inclusive. So if we change mindset, then we shall ensure we aim at building sustainable practices which are inclusive, realizing that we are all candidates of disability, or actually many of us are already persons with disability, but only rejecting that fact. For example, as I conclude, if you are using specs to read, you're only failing to make your mind believe that you have a disability at this point, and you will only accept as and when it becomes necessary. But the moment we adjust our mindset, we shall ably plan to know that if I now am a candidate of wearing specs soon because of vision, then I must ensure those who actually can't wear specs because they can't do anything to them, I must create an environment where we must all thrive.
Well, very elaborate there when it comes to barriers, mindset change, excuses of it is an additional cost. But now this takes me to strategies of empowerment, because we've known what inclusion is, we've looked at the barriers. Now what are some of those strategies adopt for empowerment of this fraternity?
First and foremost, I think if we are to empower inclusivity, we have to start with awareness. Awareness is very important because it is awareness that will change the mindset. Create awareness, and that is why as Makerere University we have launched awareness campaigns, one of them being the recent Mark Run. And when you create awareness, you prohibit stigmatization. You have had, he has talked about social stigma that comes with disability. Then secondly, training of staff and students at Makerere University is one of the ways that empowers the university community to understand how to support persons with disabilities. Not only that, we have to improve access to information, access to infrastructure, and access to other amenities. Have you created an environment where a person with a disability can access, if it's a student, have you created accommodations that can enable these students access halls of residence? Have you created provisions, accommodations that can enable staff access offices? If someone has a wheelchair, have you created space on the ground floor? So those are some of the issues that we are talking about. Creating empowerment inclusion must be visible in whatever you do. You must create practices and policies that empower inclusion. Policies should not only be on lip service, but these policies must be implemented decisively to ensure that there is empowerment for inclusion.
Now, very interesting, and I am in very much for creating that awareness, because one of the things I must say that the disability movement has tried and done to a certain extent is fighting stigma. I think that was done through creating awareness, because if you're to analyze 30 years back and today, I must say there has been some tremendous work done as far as fighting stigma is concerned. Now we are talking about inclusion, but previously even just having a person with a disability, there's so much stigmatization. But I want to say we are not yet there. But I think there are some efforts we can commend in that field. Now, this takes me to another important area, that is the workspaces. And I know here Uyombia maybe could have experienced some of these. How do we promote this at workplaces?
Thank you, Robert. It is important that all people have access to decent and fulfilling work, provided you have acquired education. Now, while it is true that the government has done some work to ensure that people with disabilities can access education, which is very recommendable, and many of them have accessed education, of course, notwithstanding the fact that there are those who have not yet been able, but at least the number has increased. Now, the trouble is about employment. Now, to paint a picture, if you realize you find it hard to get employment as someone without any disability, and you struggle for 2 years, now a person with disability, that picture is tripled. Because one, on top of the jobs not being available, they themselves, the environment is often not very welcoming. And the environment is often not willing to adjust. Now, that has made workplaces quite very tricky because there is a fear of additional cost. If you are going to employ a person, before even understanding whether actually that cost will come or it won't come, there is that fear. Two, you have the fear of, which is based on perception, will he or she actually perform? In other words, you are judged before you do what you are meant to do.
Yes.
There is a feeling that chances are high, you may either arrive late at work, you will either not be in position to reach at workplace, or if you reach, you may not do things in time. There is that judgment earlier on in workplaces. And then finally, due to lack of accountability, there are no deliberate actions to ensure that these actually persons with disability are given space to be employed. That is to say, when someone has organized an advert calling for employment, either it's in a picture form, so it has a particular audience it is restricted to. Those who can't read and will only listen will not listen to that particular advert. Those who can't see may not effectively read it. If they have read and they have applied, the moment they indicate that they have a disability, there is a fear as to whether they can sit for an interview. So sometimes that's a factor to remove them. If they don't indicate and then they suddenly arrive for interview, there is already that particular bias. Now, these are huge challenges to adjust workplaces. Indeed, many entities are coming up with policies. Some workplaces are becoming progressive, and entities like MasterCard, they're coming up with policies. I've seen their policy in Young Africa Works to see how do you create employment for this. But the problem has been also that as these programs come up, companies either they do what I could call disability washing. In other words, you act that you are employing, still as I said, because of the entrepreneurial benefits, but you are not creating particular policies to ensure you fully employ. So I believe as we move on, it's important that as companies now we are having a discourses around sustainability. Can we have deliberate discourses around inclusion, diversity and inclusion? Can you be accountable at the end of the year? How much have you been inclusive? What is your target towards inclusion? Workspace that supports all people, that attracts talent of different abilities. But how can you be deliberate? When we talk about affirmative action, it must not stop in only public entities. Even in private entities, how do you uplift groups which are actually good? We are not saying that ignore merit, no. Maintain merit, but how do you create affirmative action that these groups that have been left out for quite some time, you give them space to come into your space, disapprove you, do work, and deliberately your staff grows such that in the next 10 years or 5 years, we know that 10% of your staff 15% of your staff are persons with disabilities, and they will ably deliver. So we need to have this deliberate means of accountability, because where everyone is accountable, all of us can thrive. But where we do not where we are not held accountable in terms of inclusion, then we are only going to remain with the policies. These barriers that are existing are going to be there. We are not going to leverage on technology to see how much do we ensure our workspaces are as inclusive as possible. And this starts with the hiring team. This starts with the board. How can you come up with the policies? The way we earlier on, when the world was still very unfair in terms of gender equity, and the community world said we need this particular percentage for women. We need this particular percentage to ensure we create that balance. Can we now extend that such that we see that persons with disability are given space to amplify their voices, but to mainstream their needs? It's important that we mainstream needs for persons with disability. We should mainstream inclusion. It must not be something that we remember as, you know, as a way of marketing our entity, as a way of doing, but can we mainstream it? And I think that's why you are seeing, for example, Makere is coming up with the support center, with the idea that how do we push issues of inclusion from the margin, they come at the center, such that as we are discussing everything, can we have it? If you're discussing a budget of your entity, can you show what are you diverting towards inclusion? That will help a lot in creating space at workplaces. Otherwise, workplaces, yes, entities are trying, but we are still a long journey, and I think we must be very deliberate and intentional to ensure this is done. Don't stop at advocacy, going out as an entity, you are like, let us support this campaign for persons with disability. No, don't only support the campaign. Let it happen within your establishment itself, and let the establishment speak to the campaign.
Well, thank you so much, Luyombia. Well said. Let's be intentional. I love the word intentional. Let's not do this because of a policy or because of other benefits. Because one time, you, your loved one, your relative, you're all potential candidates of disability. But if we do not act now, then when we get there, it will be a problem. So why not join these efforts when it comes to inclusion? Every aspect. Is it a restaurant? Is it whatever you're doing, let's factor in this. Now, allow me to go for a very short break. When I return, the Dean, Doctor here, will be giving us and throwing more light how we can promote accessibility and equity in the education sector when it comes to persons with disabilities. Good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Uganda, are you ready to kick things up to the next level? The Uganda National Lottery brings you Sports Take 10. Predict the results of 10 football games and win big. With tickets at only 500 shillings, join the fun and make your predictions count with Sports Take 10. Sports Take 10, your ticket to football glory.
Uganda National Lottery. Dream, play, win.
Participants must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. The Uganda National Lottery is operated by Ituba Uganda and regulated by the National Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board.
The Ministry of Health informs the general public that there are some cases of Mpox detected in Uganda. The ministry, working with partners and affected district local governments, are doing their best to contain the situation. The signs and symptoms of Mpox are body rash, fever, general body weakness, headache, sore throat, nasal congestion or cough, and swollen lymph nodes. You can prevent yourself from getting infected with Mpox by avoiding close contact with people who have been confirmed to have Mpox or who have signs and symptoms of Mpox. Avoiding touching or sharing personal items like beddings, eating utensils, phones, or other belongings of a person who has the signs and symptoms of Mpox. avoiding contact, including eating with all wild animals, alive or dead, especially those known to carry the virus, such as rodents and monkeys, and those that appear sick or have been found dead. Getting vaccinated if you're among those who have been identified to be at high risk of Mpox infection. Mpox is treatable and usually goes away after 2 to 4 weeks. However, it can be severe, causing even death, especially among children, pregnant women, and those with other health conditions. For more information and support, contact your nearest health worker. Call the Ministry of Health's toll-free line on 0800 100 066 or send a free SMS to YouReport on 8500.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
A new dawn on Behind the Headlines with me, Timothy Nyangweso, every Wednesday live in our studios in the heart of Kampala. We have conversations that have analysis, explanation, but not every truth is fact and not every fact is truth. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m. on your public broadcaster.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda. Live from UBC studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that break, and thank you so much for being with us on UBC TV. Good Morning Uganda Extra. Robert Chirabonyonyitono, and with me I have the Dean of Students, Makerere University, Dr. Wilfred, and also a person with a disability who is doing his masters at Makerere University in law, and that is Luyombia with me here, with whom we are trying to discuss and focus on inclusion of persons with disability. Luyombia used a phrase, what is not? Nothing for us without us. Nothing for us without us. So that means if you've left them out, then they are not part of that. Well, this shouldn't be the way. We should ensure that we have them. Now we are going to the area of education. How can we promote accessibility and equity in the area of education? Because if you have a disability and then you've also not attended school, then it's double tragedy. Yes, doctor. How we can promote these? Okay, how we can promote inclusivity in education is by creating an enabling environment where all students and faculty are able to access resources, are able to access information, but not only that, they are also able to access the facilities, the educational facilities. For example, if you have students that are visually impaired, or students that are hard of hearing, are you able to create an environment where they can access information? If you're providing learning resources in print, are you able also to provide learning resources in braille material such that they can be accessible by students or staff that are visually impaired? Have you provided
interpreters for those that are hard of hearing to enable them acclimate into the learning environment. Accessibility also to infrastructure. If you have students with visual impairment and you don't have lifts, have you provided learning spaces in areas that are easily accessible, for instance, on the ground floor? And if you have those that are hard of hearing, are you able to provide sign language interpreters? And have you also sensitized the students in that class such that when they see a sign language interpreter, they don't make fun of them? Because we have seen these things happen in our learning environments. Create awareness. Have you created awareness where students appreciate and embrace diversity? Because at Makerere University, our strategic direction is to promote diversity, inclusivity, and equality. And that is what we are. In whatever we do, we ensure that we provide an environment where students can access resources. We provide helpers for our students with disabilities that are paid a salary. They are accommodated and fed. We have concentrated efforts to provide facilitation for acquisition of assistive devices such as wheelchairs, white cane, braille materials. We do all those things to ensure that our students acclimate into the learning environment, accede, to ensure that we don't obscure academic excellence in our environment. Yeah.
Very interesting there. And of course, that shouldn't be only for Makerere, but for all institutions of learning. Now, you talked about Braille, you talked about a number of gadgets there. And here I want to bring in my brother here. How can we use technology as a catalyst for inclusion of persons with disabilities?
Thank you, Robert. One important fact in life now is that technology is advancing, and as it is advancing, indeed it is that magic bullet that finally is creating equity or equality for all people, that sometimes you may not identify any person's restrictions. I will tell you, as the world has advanced, there are now cars that can be driven by persons with visual impairment. Someone can move with a visual impairment and they don't have a white cane, but they are using a device that has a GPS location. And so you will find someone moving and you will think this person, everything is well, but isn't. So that means technology is coming as a liberating factor. Now, as technology is coming as a liberating factor, one other fact is also that in our third world economies, many of these items either are delayed to arrive, or those that arrive are extremely expensive. Now, I don't know whether fortunately or unfortunately, statistically over 70%, when even you just read the current statistics released by UBC, many families that have children with disabilities are synonymous with poverty. Now, that means either they cannot provide education to their children, or if they can provide education, what must facilitate children to acquire quality education, they cannot do it. Now, what is also a problem is that poor quality education for persons with disability is no education. Because there are not other alternatives that can easily be used for them to either try to circumvent anything of low quality. So it must be of a particular high quality, and technology is what will deliver that. I will tell you, when I studied, then I used a typewriter such that my work is marked by the teachers. I'm sure many people no longer know even what typewriters do. Yet I didn't study in the 90s or even early 2000s, but I used the typewriter. Now, computers are there, but one, they're expensive. JAWS, it's software that helps, it's a screen reading software. A license is expensive. There are many other devices that are there with different companies that bring them. But it is important, I think, that the government considers waiving taxes, especially to these devices that are aimed at education for persons with disability or even daily living. Some of the things may not be for education, but as you use them in your daily life, they facilitate education. So clearly when taxes are waived, then you know the costs may go low. But also in terms of, when I talked about budgeting in terms of inclusion, it is important, I think, that when institutions, for example, Makerere can budget and the government accepts their budget, where they deliberately invest in purchasing more equipment, technological equipment for persons with disability. And these equipments might not necessarily be owned by institutions, because I will tell you, when you purchase an item, a technological item for a person with disability, and the institution is going to own it, it may not be of much help. Why? Because these items, people use them on a daily basis, such that you can't have it in your office, such that I should come and use it from there. It will not be of benefit. So some of these entities must be you give it to the individual as something that must facilitate them not only at school, but as even you push them in a work environment, these items help them. Currently I'm seeing some program is run by, I think they call them Cyber Schools Technology. They do it, I have seen, I think, with Chambogo, where they're providing braille displays, they're providing computers with JAWS on top of what the government provides to these institutions. Now, these things, even when a person leaves the school, they facilitate them in their work environment. And that reduces the excuses that might come from the working environment. You say, I can't hire you because I can't afford your computer. Even when it's the usual computer anyone uses, by the way. So when these devices are provided, one, people are able to effectively utilize their work, but also technology builds a sense of independence for persons with disability. While persons with disabilities may need helpers, they also need a life of independence. So they are not necessarily comfortable with the life of everywhere I must go with my helper. They need a life where they must live independently, where they can do certain things independently, and that's what technology does. So it's important that government, institutions, multinational companies, but also these national entities, we either through our corporate social responsibilities, through our ESG policies, we invest in, one, purchasing and availing technological items to persons with disabilities, but also institutions now, like institutions of higher learning, how much do we invest in research that seeks to create technologies that create an inclusive world?
Maybe that's where I want to bring in
Doctor.
So on the element of policy, legislative efforts, because these govern what my brother is talking about. So how are we doing and what are we not doing? Maybe, yes, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Robert. I would like to appreciate that policies protect and enhance the rights of persons with disabilities. Quite a number of policies have been developed. If I may start with international policies, we have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that promotes the rights of persons with disabilities, but also prohibits discrimination and promotes access for persons with disabilities. We have the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, 1995, that provides for promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities. Not only that, we have the Disability Act of 2019 also that promotes the rights of persons with disabilities. And at our local levels in higher education institutions like Makerere University, we have a policy for persons with disabilities that promotes the rights of persons with disabilities, that prohibits discrimination and also promotes access to education, access to social events, access in all spheres of life. And these policies should not only be lip service, but these policies should be decisively implemented to favor, to create a conducive social, economic, if it is in a higher education institution or any other education institution setting, they should facilitate academic excellence. They should be able to create an environment, and these policies should be implemented decisively to be able to benefit persons with disabilities.
I love decisively because when you began mentioning the legislations that you have in place, I was going to ask, but why do we still have these challenges? Today, issues of mobility are one of the disturbing factors of persons with disability. Today, issues of communication. One time I escorted a friend of mine who had a sister who had gone to give birth, but she had particular forms of disability. But I couldn't do sign language. The person, there was nobody there. And then they were telling us, but how are we going to communicate? And the person who helped us was doing guesswork. But though we were able to sail through. So in health sector, in so many sectors, we still have these very gaps. But good, you've hinted on the issue of ensuring that we are intentional, we are deliberate. Now, time seems to be flying, and I will be giving my brother 1 or 2 minutes to have your parting shot.
Thank you so much, Robert. I want to thank UBC for this particular time, and Makerere University that is trying to invest as much as possible towards not only awareness, but physical steps to ensure that the university environment is as inclusive as possible. And we hope this is really materialized, and 5 years from now when we look back, such that we can see there is so much. It is also a call to all entities in this country, people to sit back and reflect in terms of employment. If I sit at the Parliament of Uganda, how am I doing in terms of inclusion? What staff do I have that has persons with disability? How am I inclusive in my hiring practices at the Parliament? How am I inclusive in my hiring practices in the ministries and all that? Because government is the largest employer, and it is a signatory to international instruments, and it has adopted laws, then it must lead to see that they are materialized. So how much are we doing within our spaces? Then the private players, what are we doing to create the world that is inclusive? Because all of us are candidates of disability. So how much do we work hard to see that education is available, accessible, and of quality for persons with disability? And finally, to the parents that are there in the communities. If you have a person with disability, how do you treat that child? How do you ensure you empower that child? How do you build that child to understand that despite their disability, they are as good and as equal as to everyone? How do you ensure you do not treat this child in a special manner that finally breaks them and you're not building them? How do you help them to access education? So it's important that parents are the agents of this particular change. Believe in these children if you have them, empower them, look for spaces to see to it that you can pay for them. Do not think anyone's going to liberate them. I've seen it in many parents. When you have a child with disability, you think that child must be paid for by either some European somewhere or someone in government. So you see, my child is at home because you see these entities that support them have not helped us, but you are paying for other children. So can we acknowledge that this is your child, it is your mandate, and carry your responsibilities? Then the government will join you from there, and let's do so much to create an inclusive world. Let us all be accountable, and let us see to it that in all that we do, in budgeting, in planning, in employment, in education, we are as inclusive as we can be, and in wherever space we are in, to know that chances are high that there are persons with disability and you must take care of them. I'll conclude by saying that the way we plan when you have an event and you buy soda and water when no one has told you that we don't take sodas, all of us, but you think there must be those who don't take sodas. It's the same way you should be in every space you are in. Imagine there is someone who has not privately come to disclose to you their disability. But imagine there might be that person, and try to create an environment that will help them thrive even without disclosing their disability. Thank you so much for this opportunity to come and share. I pray that this message impacts someone there. We say this aiming to serve our country. Thank you so much. For God and my country, we build for the future.
Thank you so much, Yuyombia there. Now I come to Doctor as we get offset your final remark.
Thank you very much, Robert, for giving us this opportunity to be here to talk about a subject that is very dear to us, I and my colleague, Abbas. My parting shots is that to get disability inclusion, you must be proactive, and it is collaborative. You must be committed and willing to create an enabling environment. And as Makerere University, we are committed to providing an enabling environment to all our students with disabilities. We appreciate your resilience, and we are here to support you. We are here to create an inclusive environment as we position ourselves to be the best university in Africa. We have made significant strides in promoting inclusivity. We have established the Disability Center at Makerere University, a one-stop center for resources, support services, and other supports for persons with disabilities. We invite you also, as we commemorate the International Day for Persons with Disabilities tomorrow, the 13th of November. We have brought it forward because of the upcoming examinations, but ideally it is celebrated on the 3rd of November. Together, we can create an inclusive community. Thank you very much.
Well, it's all been about voices for inclusion. Voices for inclusion. That a person with a disability does not feel left out. We have them on board in each and everything we do. Now, this is sacrifice, because some of these require putting in money. But remember, no one causes a disability, and you don't know when it will knock your door. So let's all join this and ensure that there is total inclusion for our brothers, for our sisters that have specific or particular forms of disabilities. Have a lovely day. Happy International Day for persons with disability, and may God bless you.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
The Ministry of Health informs the general public that there are some cases of MPOX detected in Uganda. The ministry, working with partners and affected district local governments, are doing their best to